All right.
Can you move?
Thanks for coming.
Move center.
Move center? Yeah.
Move closer to you.
We can all.
To me.
And her.
Yeah, thanks for coming. This is amazing. Gus said that they never fill up the theaters like this, but okay. But it's really cool that everybody came. And this is a project that started. Should I introduce it, maybe?
Yeah, you
Okay.
can.
So I guess it started about 2 years ago or so. Well, to go way back, when I was in, when My Own Private Idaho came out, I was a teenager. I guess I wasn't even in high school, and I loved it. From the first time I watched it, and when it came out on VHS, I rented from the video store, and it just, was my favorite movie. So then, years later, I started acting professionally, and I ended up doing a movie with Gus called Milk, which was great, and also kind of a great movie, and in a lot of ways a dream come true, just because Gus had directed, my favorite movie and many other movies that I loved, and I guess the way Gus tells it is we'd met before, yeah, we'd met before, but then we met on Milk for the role of Scott Smith, and then go ahead.
Oh yeah, that was interesting because James came for a meeting to talk about Harvey Milk and Scott Smith, and then what we were planning to do when we made Milk, and we talked for 2 hours about My Own Private Idaho, and nothing at all about Harvey Milk, which is, significant amount of gay history, and so we left that for later, and we talked about it. So I was sort of struck with this new information because I had known James from earlier, maybe 10 years earlier, in Hollywood, and had never known that he really, was so interested in My Own Private Idaho. And so with that information, later after we had made Milk, and we were doing a fundraiser here at the Erling Schnitzer concert hall with Milk. We needed to get, it was going to help us to get somebody in the movie, one of the actors in the movie, Sean Penn perhaps, to be up here. But Sean, I was afraid might have difficulty with his schedule and so forth. And James, I had something to lure him up here with, which was the outtakes of My Own Private Idaho, which I knew were very important after talking to him for 2 hours. Or even
actually, it was just at that point I didn't even know you had the outtakes. You literally me with a tour of all.
Oh, just a tour. I was going to use it for later, the outtakes, for some other fundraising. But so eventually I showed the outtakes to James, and that's where he came up with the idea. Well, first what he said was he wanted to digitize all of the outtakes, and there's about 20 hours, I think.
More, probably about 25.
Of the outtakes. So I said it was going to cost a lot of money, and then James fashioned a way to pay for it through Gucci, which was which was they underwrote it as part of basically an art project, which is ostensibly what you're seeing is it's like an art gallery right now, and we're here presenting the piece of art, and it showed. It was originally for the Gagosian Gallery, a showing in February, and. So then it was all digitized, and once it was digitized, then James threw the idea of how about if I edit my own version of the movie, and which was new. I didn't know that was in store. So you did, and then before I saw it, I remember you also just took about a month or two to edit, which was really fast. James sent it to the office, and in the office, my two friends and assistants, one of whom was Scott Green, who had been in My Own Private Idaho. They had watched it first before. I think I asked them to watch it just to check it out. And I was assuming it would be pretty iffy, and then they said no, it's pretty good. And so when I watched it, I was prepped, and thought, oh wow, so it's like actually, in some ways better than the original in its way. It's a little. I mean, all the dirt's there because the original transfer is scratched up and stuff like that. But it was
also what you kept, because Gus normally, Gus made it in '99 and it came out in '91, and so they were cutting on film. And I guess I'm from the age of digital editing, but the way I understand it back then, the editor would get his own copy, but it was kind of a slightly degraded copy. It wasn't the best version of the film, right? But that's what you had. So that's why there's all this, kind of dirt on it and scratches. But in a way, it kind of adds to it, I think, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's like a first light print, work print.
Yeah.
But the colorist, like sort of as it went by, he tried to work with it, but it was pretty well preserved. That was another reason to do something with it. It was well preserved.
And so, in my head, there were a lot of reasons to do this, but also a lot of, to me, it's very delicate and precious kind of material for a lot of reasons. Personal reasons. It's such an important movie to me. Probably my favorite film. It's filmed by Gus Van Sant. One of his best films. We have kind of like chronology disagreements or something, but it seems to me like it was a very important movie for the new queer cinema movement that came very soon after. But maybe you say it wasn't an influence. I don't know. I think it was it was definitely one of the first films that explored this kind of subject matter in such an honest way, and then also it's has River Phoenix in giving his best performance, in my opinion. And so for all those reasons, I was very cautious and respectful when dealing with this material, and the fact that Gus allowed me to work with it was something that was really almost hard to fathom. And so and in a lot of ways it felt like I almost had to justify to myself my working on it, for a lot of reasons, because of how valuable the material was, but also because I was an actor, cutting someone else's material. People might feel weird about that, and the material itself. People might feel very loyal to the original, and so I really wanted to present it in a way that it didn't seem like this was in any way trying to compete with the original, or was trying to be an entertainment in the sense that it would be like somehow a failure if it didn't go out and sell a million tickets. That it was very important to me that we present it like kind of an exploration, and so that was one of the reasons we presented it at an art gallery originally, and then at the PS1 Museum in New York.
But also there's My Own Private River, which is the first project that James had recut from the original outtakes, which has its own sort of retelling of the story. But then there was also like over the last year requests that James sent me for other material, like early screenplays that I had written that were used to make My Own Private Idaho. It was kind of a collage of 3 different screenplays that were refashioned to make one story. And one of the earlier screenplays was called My Own Private Idaho. The other one was called In a Blue Funk, and another one, I can't remember the title of it, but one was just Shakespeare, and one was about just Mike Waters, and then My Own Private Idaho was actually about 2 Mexican-American kids that were sort of on the streets. They were just characters that were downtown Portland, and it was about a 28-page outline for what they also went. They traveled to Spain, so there's these 2 Portland street characters traveled to Europe. So that kind of like influenced the things that were happening in Idaho. So James has My Own Private River is an hour and 40 minutes, and James has actually gone and shot an entire 1-hour movie called Idaho with these 2 Mexican-American kids in LA, and we're going to show that afterwards.
Yeah, I didn't want to. There's separate projects, so we didn't want to make it seem like you had to sit for 3 hours if you didn't want to. But I guess the way it worked out, we had 2 theaters full of people that were so maybe there'll be a little intermission between them. I don't know, but yeah, the second one will come after. It's an hour long, and it's shot on 8mm because, again, it's supposed to be, not a movie like you would go and see, Transformers 3 in a big theater. It's like it's supposed to be entertaining, but it's also supposed to be something else. It's kind of an exploration of this material, and it's supposed to feel like, well, the subtitle is Memories of a Movie That Was Never Made, because it is an early version of My Own Private Idaho that at one time Gus had intended to shoot. I guess maybe if you had gotten the money back then, you would have shot that version. And so the 8mm is supposed to kind of suggest this kind of a memory kind of feeling. And so for My Own Private Idaho, Not Like Me, I think it's really interesting. But it is 2 hours and 40 minutes worth of stuff, so I don't know.
It's all night.
So Gus, Gus.
I've never seen this. Yeah. The Idaho. So yeah. So. It's good. As Gus said, he had been thinking about the material that eventually went into his version of My Own Private Idaho for years, and actually it goes farther than even the 3 scripts that you cut and pasted together. Before Gus came to Portland, he went to the Rhode Island School of Design in Rhode Island, and then he moved to Hollywood and lived near Hollywood Boulevard. And as far as I know, Gus can correct me if this is wrong, he was thinking about a film based on some of the younger, street kids that he saw living in LA. And then actually, maybe even you had something to do with City of Night, the book City of Night? I was writing a script about people that I had seen living, or just, in places that I went on Hollywood Boulevard, say, like, just to like the post office or the street. And it was really it was a kind of a Times Square filled with all kinds of homeless youth that I had an apartment. I was outside of that, but I could see everybody, and I kind of tried to fashion a fictional account with not much knowledge, first-hand knowledge. And then I read City of Night by John Reishi, which part of it takes place right on Hollywood Boulevard, and I realized that there was this other work that was so vastly superior than anything I could actually accomplish that I just stopped. Until later, I sort of rekindled the project in Portland, like 10 years later.
And then, so it was, and then you'll see in Idaho, if you watch it, there's two characters that, in a lot of ways, resemble the characters that River and Keanu eventually played in My Own Private Idaho, but in this they're younger and they're Chicano characters. And I guess that was partly based on two people that you knew that you were going to cast in the movie at that time.
Yeah, there was Ray Manji, who had acted in Malanoche, an early film, and he had a cousin named Little George that together I had met them, and they were just characters. So with these characters and actors in mind, I created a story that they could play in, a fictional story that didn't really have to do with them or anyone. It was just made up, and was never made. So
they're old. They're older now. That was over 20 years ago. So I couldn't use the guys that Gus had in mind. But I got the son of this woman I knew in L.A. And he had never acted before, and his name's Milan. And I thought, well, that'll be good, because originally in My Own Private Idaho, Gus had intended the Mike and Scott characters to be played by, I guess, non-actors, or at least non-actors of the stature of River and Keanu. And so I thought, okay, we'll go back to that kind of approach. And he got his friend Sage to act in it. And so I thought I had these really green performers. But it turned out, and I really didn't know this, but it turned out that Milan's mother, Yvette, is very good friends with Leonardo DiCaprio. And Leo is, I guess, Milan's godfather. So he actually coached these two guys in these performances, and I guess he gave them this advice. I didn't know, while we were shooting, I didn't know this until the end, that they should know their lines, and they definitely did. They knew all the lines, and they gave like great, really great performances. Well, understated performances, but really good. And I guess that was had a lot to do with Leo. And the way I found out that he even knew them was we were shooting a scene at this hotel in LA, the Chateau Marmont, and we were getting ready to shoot, and all these people were pouring into the room like it was like a party or something. And I told my producer Iris, I can't work like this. Get all these people out of here. This isn't a party. And so I look over, and Leo was there, in his hat, and he's getting kicked out, and he was, coming to watch his godson act for the first time, and so I felt really bad, and then I went outside in the hall an hour later, and he was out there waiting, and I just felt horrible, but I want to give him a lot of credit for working with these kids, and they did a great job, and I guess I see that piece also kind of falling in line with this project as a whole, because Gus's script, was a compilation of 3 scripts, but it goes back even farther than that. One of the big things, one of the scripts was based on Shakespeare, but actually inspired by Orson Welles' film Chimes at Midnight, which was a compilation of all the Falstaff material from the Henry IV plays. And so it was interesting to me to see all these steps of kind of inspiration, or where Gus was looking to Orson Welles, looking to Shakespeare, and then Shakespeare's basing that on English history, and so I thought, well, it might be interesting to kind of fill in one of the steps that eventually led to My Own Private Idaho, and not in a way where like we just present this early draft of one of the scripts that maybe people will kind of glance at. But actually realize it in some form, and so that led to this hour-long movie. So,
any questions? Yes.
Hi, Katie O'Brady. I wanted to thank you guys for bringing this to the Hollywood Theater, because that's great. What was sort of your inspiration after you premiered it to come back over here, and will you be showing it again, and then will you be working together again?
yeah, but we work together again.
Not after this. Well, let's see. This first showing was the Gagosian Gallery in LA. It was shown at PS1 in New York. It was shown at the Toronto Gallery during the Toronto Film Festival. I think Carrie Brownstein.
PS1.
Carrie, are you here? Carrie's maybe downstairs, but I think she wanted to somehow. Maybe you had mentioned the project to her, but she had suggested to the Hollywood about showing this last May, and then we thought like James could come, and then James couldn't make it till tonight, so this was like a Carrie Brownstein inspiration.
We're also going to show the film again on Wednesday night at 7:30 on October 5th.
October 5th. Yes.
Thank you both. Gus, I was wondering if you had any opportunities to work with another famous Portlander, Chuck Palahniuk, and bring any of his books to the screen?
Chuck Palahniuk. I've met Chuck and I've read a number of his books. I've suggested working on something just recently, but it doesn't sound like he's taking the bait. He's probably busy. I think he's actually promoting a new book, but not so far. No. Yeah.
I just want to say that I've been following Gus's work from almost the beginning and admiring it and appreciating it as a fellow Portlander and as an actor and writer. And deeply appreciate what you're doing. And I want to say to James that what you've been doing the last few years is very inspiring. Really appreciate the direction you're taking. And I want to ask you if I brought along a copy of the short story that I wrote that I wanted to share with you.
Sure. Good idea. Yes.
I was wondering if either of you could talk about River's performance. And I know it inspired this whole.
Yeah, I mean, he was at the time, before we made the film, James was saying earlier that after Malanoche, which I was using pretty much non-actors in a kind of quote-unquote neo-realistic fashion, and Drugstore Cowboy I was intending to do that in the same way, but I after showing Malanoche, I was able to like work more in Hollywood, and that was better. It got a bigger budget, and also like needed established actors. So we were working that way, and we wanted to go back to non-actors with Idaho, and then we thought maybe we should just check with our favorites. And River was one of them, and Keanu was the other. And so we asked them independently. And really, we're intending the two characters, like River to be Mike, and Keanu to play the Prince Hal-based character of Scott. And they both said yes. So it sort of changed our game plan, so it was no longer like local Oregon actors. And it was like he was already this sort of amazing actor. Had done Mosquito Coast, and after Stand By Me was sort of his breakthrough. But yeah, talk about his performance.
I guess.
Ethan Hawke.
Oh God. The thing about River that when I started acting, I guess the thing that always stands out for me is he seemed to kind of make every role his own, and there was something Gene Hackman, I think, said about a different actor, Jack Nicholson. I guess like Gene Hackman had been up for One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest or something like that, and then when he saw Nicholson's performance, he thought, I would have never thought to do it that way. And if you read the book, and it's not, it's different. And what Nicholson did is different. He kind of made it his own in a way. And I always felt like that's kind of what River did. Like when I watched his performances, it's like, wow, how did he ever think to do it that way? Or how did, it was just something he had that would enliven and expand every role that he did. So and I sort of feel like it's something I wouldn't even try to do. Like when I get a role, like I try to serve the movie and what I read, and I wouldn't know how to capture what he was doing, but. It always feels like there's just something more that he's bringing to all the roles, and especially in this role. And so that's what I get from him.
Also, the working styles were interesting. Like River's inclination, because I had City of Night that I sent both River and John Reishi, and Keanu. Whereas River read I think half of the first page of the novel and decided he knew it all, because he'd also been he'd lived on the street, and he had busked in Westwood with his brothers and sisters and his father, and he had I think he really felt like he knew exactly the character, whereas Keanu had a lot different character since he was playing something based on Prince Hal and Shakespeare, and Keanu read the John Reishi City of Night, and then he read all 5 other John Reishi books, which was a real strange contrast, because you would think maybe the opposite about the two of them, just because of maybe their PR or whatever. But River was a really quick study. And he used his imagination to fill it in.
Time for one more question.
Hi. I'm wondering if, for James, did you feel like a connection with River as you were going through the editing process?
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about it in this Q&A, but when we got the material digitized, it wasn't a done deal that I would get to work with the material. I had to, that was a big, it was a hard thing to ask Gus, but I finally worked it out, the audacity to ask him, and he agreed to let me, have my own copy of the material and to work with it under the proviso that if he didn't like it, he would never, we'd never show it to anybody. And I think that's what he thought was going to happen. He'd say, yeah, we shouldn't show anybody. But when I got the drive with the material on it and then put it into Final Cut, it was really... and Gus... I guess, Gus, you don't remember. I remember asking you about this, but you said you don't remember saying it. But you said when you see that material in the machine, it's going to be really weird for you. And it was, because My Own Private Idaho was probably my favorite movie, and so to see all the raw material there it's like I don't know. It's like seeing the raw material of your youth or dreams, or I don't know, something. And then also considering how important the movie was to me, to other people, how important that performance was, and how valuable it is. I mean, all of that was kind of weighing on me, and so it made me approach it with, obviously deep respect, but also I didn't want to I didn't like the idea that I was putting any of my own style in there. Obviously, I'm not going to, something of me is going to be in there, but my approach was to say, I'm not going to make this like I would make it. I'm going to try and make it like Gus would make it today, which was an idea, that we had way back where we started, Gus and I started talking about how he makes films differently today, and what if he had made this film today, and that, he had been doing long takes in this movie even back then in '91, so it was this idea that we could just stay with the takes and not cut as much, and so that's kind of how I made it, and yeah, it was just, an honor to be able to, see all that material and watch all that material, and really, I guess what I was thinking is, this means so much to me just to be able to see it. I'd really love other people to be able to see it, so that was also one of the big motivations behind the project.